Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, July 19th, 2021. Anybody got any ideas for how to do a radio show? No? Okay. Well, then you can't blame me for screwing this one up. No, there's plenty to go over, of course. Lots of news from the weekend. Greg Dworkin will straighten us all out with that. We've got lots to catch up on. Lots of suggestions already. Thanks very much. It was a rhetorical question. I didn't really mean that we needed... we always will take the suggestions, and thank you for sending them in. In fact, it wouldn't be a rhetorical question to ask you if you had any ideas to go forward with the radio show if you hadn't already sent several of them. So I don't know what that means. This is basically standard opening to the show. Okay. I just like to profess that we don't know what we're going to do. We don't, but we never worry about that. Not because we don't care, but because we know you're taking care of us. I don't know. So did we turn that around? Did we make that into a positive? We'll call it as such. All right. Good morning. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. I found this out by reading Bill's tweet from Portland, Maine. That's where it came from. It was sent all the way by Squirrel Messenger from Portland, Maine. There's one right outside now. There's a Squirrel Express that runs these things in between our two houses, and it just costs a couple of cashew nuts. It's a pretty good deal. Okay, what are we going to do today? Well, here's what Bill thinks we'll do. Join Kagro X, me, David Waldman, for an exciting game of Where the Hell is the Ohio National Guard Today? Yes, it's true. That was one of the morning conversations. Ohio joins the parade of Republican states, I maintain, claiming, and only claiming, to have sent its National Guard troops and possibly also some state police, some state troopers, to the Texas border to help out with patrolling there. Why they think the border between Texas and Oklahoma needs that kind of monitoring, I have no idea. It's probably a COVID thing, and really overall not a bad idea. And I'm not 100% certain that that's exactly the border that they meant, but it might as well be. And of course, Texas borders several other states as well that they might also be patrolling. Arkansas would be a good idea to set up a patrol, although there you'd probably want to protect Texans from Arkansans? Razorbacks, I guess we'll call them instead, from flooding into the let's say into the Dallas-Fort Worth area if they made a bit of a drive. Louisiana would be a good idea to protect, although I couldn't tell you which direction the protection should go there. Of course, big border with New Mexico and Old Mexico as well, which might as well now probably be thanking Trump for the 16 feet of wall that was built so that people with COVID don't flood into Mexico and make things worse for them there. But at any rate, yes, I think there's a lot of cosplay going on here. Of course, anybody who is dispatched to Texas is basically, as I've said, on taxpayer-funded Republican summer fantasy camp trip for however long they're there. But it is still my suspicion that the story is not as it is being told. And my wild speculation on the story is that digging into this might just reveal that no one's going to Texas, no one's going to the border or anywhere near it, and they're not helping at all, and they might not even be leaving the state. There's this curious multi-state practice of keeping the details of any of the alleged detailing of soldiers and police entirely in the dark. It's secret. They won't tell what the dispatched troops or police are doing, where they're going, how much it costs, who's paying, or who's paying what portion. Even, what was it? Was it South Dakota? Yeah, where Kristi Noem put an interesting spin on it. She gave herself a leg up in the Republican debates and the primary for 2024 if Donald Trump doesn't want to be, there, in a wheelchair, pretending to be healthy enough to campaign for president. But in his absence, I guess Kristi Noem ready to go, but her spin on it was, oh, we're not wasting any taxpayer dollars. A private donor has offered to pay for this, which only makes things worse, of course. But again, my theory is, and why not go with this? It's a baseless theory, but there's no reason. I mean, they're telling people not to get vaccinated, and they're dying as a result. So I don't think my baseless theory actually hurts anyone, but I don't know. I have a strong feeling that we'll find out something. And at the very least, it should be taken as motivation by investigative reporters to check into this stuff, because it does raise a legitimate question. Not even if you believe everything is on the or not on the up and up, but everything is as it's being reported, that troops and police from these states really are being dispatched to Texas, you would be interested naturally, I think, as an investigative reporter, to find out how much it costs and what they're doing and how we're covering those costs. But my suspicion is that the playbook is, if you make this announcement and then say everything is going to be secret because something national security, essentially the state equivalent of national security, to which you're not entitled, by the way, and involves no national security whatsoever. But one, that local reporters anyway, if not national reporters, will buy into that explanation because they're used to it surrounding people who are vaguely military in nature. And two, it protects you then if they swallow that bait, and there has to be secrecy around it, then you never have to explain either where they are or, in fact, whether they've actually gone, and, of course, who's paying for it. And I think that it just means you can pose as being extremely tough on the border by sending, of course, tough people. And everyone knows that state police and National Guard troops are tough people and therefore Republican, even though very often the troops are not. But at any rate, you can be tough on the border and also avoid all questions about how much this is costing taxpayers. Of course, if you don't dispatch anyone, it's costing taxpayers zero, and you can later claim that. And if people say, how could it possibly cost taxpayers zero? Then you make up the name of a donor and say that they sent us lots and lots of money, and we took it to send the troops there, and only afterwards do you think, oh, geez, that could be really actually fairly dangerous in terms of the idea of privatizing the military in this country, but it never occurred to me to do. It was an easy answer to make the expenditure zero, which is what I wanted to get to as a Republican, but I forgot that it would maybe pose constitutional problems because I've never read that document. And I think that that's probably at the heart of what's going on. And at the very least, it helps them avoid answering the question, if they really are dispatching people to the border and doing so at state expense, that could be a major embarrassment when people find out that there's nothing for them to do at the border, or that people don't like the idea of Ohio National Guard troops being put under the command of Texas yahoos for who knows what purpose. And so you just hide the ball that way. And at the very least, it's a great story waiting to be discovered by investigative reporters, just to find out where did they go if they did go, and why wouldn't you tell us if we're the ones paying for it? Makes for a good story. Not that we're going to cover it here. We've got plenty of other things to go to. But that, I guess, if you live in a state with a Republican governor and your troops haven't allegedly been sent yet, I gather that maybe that guy's campaign in a box hasn't arrived yet. But pretty soon it will, and your governor will do the same. Greg Dworkin is here. No sense in keeping him waiting at this point. He's got all the regular stories. I have the made-up ones. So, good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. Well, speaking of made-up ones,
Yes.
First of all, if you haven't sent troops down to the Texas border, it means you're not running for president.
Yeah.
And secondly, it means that once the Ohio National Guard gets wherever they're going, the real reason they're there, of course, is to round up Texas Democrats and make sure that they go to the House of
Yes.
Representatives and vote on stuff that Republicans want them to.
I think as Texas looks to round up their fugitive Democrats, and I guess we can get to I got another story about that later, but that was also
you
something
include
I
it
thought
in the
about.
abbreviated Democratic Roundup because
Yeah.
that's what they're trying to do.
They should do that. I mean, if you turn the command of your troops over to Texas because border or something, I think Texas should say, you know what, we're going to round up the Democrats from our state for free. I'm not spending Texas money to do it. I'm going to send the Ohio guys. I'm going to send the South Dakota guys. They're under my command now. Go out there in the land and find them and, check every Hooters just in case, if that's what you want to do on your trip.
Right, and of
Send us
course,
the
as
bill.
far as the media coverage of it goes, there's some basics that have been true for years that still are true. Tough guys have guns, and therefore they're Republicans, and these guys have guns, so, it's a Republican story. And if you're covering Washington, Washington is a Republican town, and the only people that exist are centrists and rightists.
Yeah.
And all legislation is basically a balance of those two groups, and there happen to be anybody left of center, they don't count. We don't have to cover them.
Yeah, well, that sums it up. Thanks for listening. Bye, everybody.
Well, these abbreviated roundups are what we do.
That is abbreviated AF, as the kids say.
Today's pundit roundup actually led with something you were talking about, and that is media responsibility in the spotlight. But that was because Daily Beast had a really nice podcast that I didn't listen to because I'm really good at not listening to good podcasts, just telling you about them.
Yes.
But they published the transcript, so it was interesting.
Good
It's
job.
called The Desperate Laundering of the Trump Reputations. Ivanka didn't really want to go to Stop the Steal rally with her dad. A top general feared a Reichstag moment. And Molly Jong Fast, who writes for the Daily Beast, couldn't believe it. 6 months later, that's what the general has to say? You're part of the Reichstag moment? But no one knows image rehab better than Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. In fact, they've been doing it for years. Sources close to Jared and Ivanka say was the most used phrase in print of the Trump administration.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Right? And now comes
secretly
news
appalled.
that Ivanka didn't want to go to Stop the Steal because she's very concerned with her image. But she decided to go anyway to support her dad. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah. She decided to continue to get her allowance.
Right, pretty much.
Duh.
So that's one element of media responsibility. Another element, actually, I'd like to cover a little bit in depth, has to do with the pandemic. So I'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's look at some statistics here. As you probably are aware right now, there's a Delta variant circulating in the U.S.
And Tokyo.
And if one looks, let's use worldometers. We like worldometers, and it's good. Active cases in Missouri are rising, but active cases in Arkansas are rising faster.
Yes.
And
Texas border.
actually, active cases in Florida are rising faster still.
Yes, when they tell you about them.
When they tell you about them. And yet, if you look at the numbers, active cases in each situation here, each state, they're nowhere near what they were back 6 months ago, December, January.
Yes.
And that's helpful to keep in mind. It's bad, but not as bad as it was. And there's a lot to
Weird
discuss
category,
about why that is, but it comes down to the fact that not enough people are vaccinated. And yet, it's a debate among people who are trying to get people vaccinated as to the usefulness of trying to divide the country into vaccinated and unvaccinated, call it an unvaccinated pandemic wave, and then lock them in a room and let them die because who cares? They didn't get vaccinated. It was their choice. And that seems to be one strain of how you cover this. And quite another different strain from people who are actually trying to persuade people. And so that's what I'm going to concentrate on.
Yes.
Let's just give you some examples here. Here's, as you know, I've been doing a little mini-series on, I'm sorry I didn't get vaccinated. And this one is from the New York Times, David Leonhardt. Vaccine persuasion. Many vaccine skeptics have, in fact, changed their minds.
Aha.
When the Kaiser Family Foundation conducted a poll at the start of the year and asked American adults whether they planned to get vaccinated, 23% said no. But about a quarter of that group have since decided to get a shot.
Gotcha.
Right? The Kaiser pollsters recently followed up and asked these converts, what led you to change your mind? And the answers are important because they offer insight into how the millions of still unvaccinated Americans might be persuaded to get shots too.
All right.
And it gives the background, of course, of how things are getting worse. But here are the three themes. One, seeing that millions of other Americans have been safely vaccinated. That's important because, well, let's tune it. Well, 1 million arms have gotten the shots and they're not dropping like flies, so it's safe.
Yes, certainly fewer dropping than were dropping from the virus.
Right. Number 2, hearing pro-vaccine messages from doctors, friends, and relatives. The old-fashioned thing. That still works.
I can't. Someone should try that. Yeah, okay.
Right. And number 3, learning that not being vaccinated will prevent people from doing things.
Yeah, that was the second thing we all tried. So I guess that worked.
That works too, but, like in France, for example, if you don't get vaccinated, you're not going to be able to go to things. You're not going to be able to go places. There's going to be basically vaccine passports. And we passed on doing that here. Maybe we should have, but you can do it differently. I remember all my California friends said, we're never going back to lockdowns and masking. Well, we're not going to go back to lockdowns because it's nowhere near what it was back 6 months ago. If we ever got to where it was 6 months ago, you're damn right we would. Hopefully we won't need to. And with the vaccinated people in the U.S. and in California, we probably won't need to. So it's safe to say that. But it's not as if you have some great insight. It's that you're banking on the fact that it's not going to get as bad as it did 6 months ago. And that's probably true. That's not the same thing as we just won't do it. Or people won't do it. They will.
Right.
They'll do what they need to do based on circumstance. For example, there's other stories in the press about how Los Angeles is going back to mask everybody,
right? And
they're reluctantly accepting it. And the reason they're reluctantly accepting it is because when the CDC said you don't have to wear masks if you've been vaccinated, the unvaccinated took that as license to lie about what they were doing. And guess what? That didn't work. Duh.
Oh, I can't believe it.
It out at the time.
Yeah. Right, and all right. So once again, the bad people are the reason we can't have nice things, and so
pretty much, and because that's the case, you have to figure out what to do given the fact that there are bad people. Some are very bad. Utah pharmacist surrenders license after fraudulently distributing COVID-19 vaccine cards. Right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
In fact, some companies are selling fake coronavirus vaccine cards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that was immediately obvious, but okay, now we're
this particular pharmacist in Utah also admitted he allowed the pharmacy technician to counsel a patient on unconfirmed adverse reactions. The technician advised the reluctant patient the vaccine could cause infertility, which the pharmacist failed to correct according to the order. Now, that's a big thing because one of the reasons that people will cite as to why I don't get the vaccine, and in fact, if you look at the statistics, more women are refusing the vaccine than men, is because that infertility false information rumor is circulating like wildfire on social media.
That's not good because I've seen actual wildfire and how it circulates.
It's not good. No. It also caused lightning storms and stuff. So it causes its own weather. So that's part of the background there. And that's, to put the Missouri, Arkansas, Florida stuff in perspective. Now, here's another poll of what Americans think. And remember, issues polls aren't the same thing as horse race polls. A majority of Americans who don't intend to get vaccinated think the U.S. government is using vaccines to microchip the population. Right, Ian Bremer, one of the most insane statistics about the U.S. I've ever encountered.
Yeah, well,
right?
That one plus the president who wasn't born in this country, whatever, but same people.
Now, 20% of adults think that. 18% think that vaccines have been shown to cause autism. So, 18 to 20% of the population is just nuts. But that's the case, and so you have to deal with that. And the fact that 23% or so say they're not going to get vaccinated fits well with the idea that that's going on. So I want to dive into that a little bit deeper and look at two threads about vaccine hesitancy, but also involving media responsibility here, which is one of the themes today. Because, you have to have a theme, like we're a professional radio show or something, right? So this one's by Nicholas Grossman. Now, I don't want to put pressure on you to have a theme, but sometimes we do.
Okay. Yeah.
Politics and pandemics. That's our theme today.
Yeah.
So Nicholas Grossman
been doing that for a year.
Writes, everyone having a politicized argument about vaccine hesitancy or refusal. Are you sure you're talking about the same people? Let me explain.
Well, swing voters,
and that happens all the time,
aren't,
right?
So why not? Right.
Like whenever we talk about who doesn't vote or why are you going to the middle on trying to persuade people to vote. Why don't you just get your base out? Well, let's be clear about who we're talking about.
All right.
Persuasion isn't for the base.
True.
Getting them enraged is for the base.
Yeah.
Right? Persuasion is for the undecideds in the middle, if there are any.
Yes, okay. So
Right?
what are we going to do with these guys?
And then insults are for the other side.
I have those.
Right? But those are different categories, and don't insult the ideological middle.
Right. Not all
Yeah.
ideological middle.
Right? Broadly, 3 categories about not getting shots. Ideological anti-vaxxers, that includes many lefty, woo-woo, all-natural types. You read?
Yes, make sure you punch.
And that was true,
leftist.
before the pandemic, Marin County, for example.
Sure.
Ideological anti-vaxxers were committed to that position before COVID and are probably unconvincible. If tons of studies debunking myths about vaccines and autism won't convince them, remember, 18% of the population thinks the vaccines cause autism.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt more information about COVID-19 vaccines or public encouragement could either. I mean, if data doesn't do it, what would? And then there's the second group, the hesitant, for a variety of reasons. Some are lazy. Some don't think it matters. And that's mostly young, healthy people. Some are cautious. Some are poorly informed. Some are distrusting of government and other public authorities for very good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like their populations have been used before.
Okay.
Right? And by the way, access isn't on this list, but should be. Those are the gettable ones. The hesitant should be the focus of public outreach, and it is. And so whenever we're talking about how you could work to get the hesitant to get vaccinated, somebody says, yes, but there are a bunch of, red state morons, and we should just let them die. Well, that's a different group. That's group number 3.
You're not wrong,
We'll get to
but
group number
it's a
3.
different
Not
group.
wrong,
Okay.
but different group. Well, wrong to let them die.
Yeah,
not wrong to
sure.
try not to
right.
persuade.
Yeah, right. Well, next Sunday I'll remember.
Right? If you're a doctor or a hospital, you
pray
don't say,
about it.
okay, oh, you're wearing a MAGA hat, you can't come in. That's
Right.
not how it works.
You don't say that.
You don't do that.
Oh,
The hesitant should be the
yes.
focus of public outreach. Many are checked out of current events, non-voters who can't name the vice president and need creative messaging. So Olivia Rodrigo, which was in the news for a couple of days
Right.
because she did
Very
a
famous.
PSA with Biden, is more likely to reach young people. Others need to hear from trusted community leader. And searches for Olivia Rodrigo, by the way, went way up. So on social media, yes, it did work.
Super
The
famous
wary, the lazy,
now.
the uninformed make for a public health and messaging challenge, but aren't good political props unless you're trying to find excuses, distractions, or blame shifting for the last category, which is the partisans and culture warriors, like Tucker Carlson, I would add. For them, politics is a big factor. And then Nicholas Grossman includes a Charles Gaba chart here. Vaccination rate correlates with POTUS vote right down to the county level. Charles did that. Hard to see this and assume politics and media diets have nothing to do with vaccine decisions, turning Fauci into a caricatured villain, wanting Biden to fail, Fox blaring conspiracy theories are all factors. And that creates a problem for conservative pundits because it means conservatives might bear some responsibility for something bad, and that won't do. It must be the mainstream media, Democrats, and online progressives' fault. So it can't be because Tucker Carlson is lying to them every night. It must be because public health officials had messaging on masks last spring all wrong. Or because some doctors and media figures supported George Floyd protests saying stuff like racism is a bigger problem.
Okay.
So the criticisms about messaging are okay. Fauci should have leveled with the public about wanting health workers to have enough masks instead of saying regular people don't need them. And again, I have to remind people, part of the problem there is that the public health establishment wasn't ready to assume and to suggest and to agree and to accept that the virus was airborne. And that led them to de-emphasize masks. They were still talking about deep cleaning and all that other crap that doesn't work.
Right.
So that's part of it. Unless you accept that it's airborne or know that it's airborne, you're not going to push masks.
Right.
So anybody who warned about COVID at gatherings should have done the same for protests. And, it's true. I went to a Black Lives Matter protest outside, fully masked, with a lot of people, and I was nervous about it. I felt like, I was taking a reasonable precaution because it was outside and it was a 15-minute rally
Yeah.
with everybody keeping their distance. But it was not just to be ignored and go there without masks and just do Sturgis. That's not what it was.
No, we'll do that later.
And it was okay to say it's a problem, but if you want to go, here's what you do.
Yeah.
In my view. Anyway, but as a cause of vaccine refusal, most people don't trawl through media and comments from the broadly defined left looking for gotchas and making a big deal out of it. That's what conservative pundits do. If this shaped their views, it's because you, conservative pundits, told them it should.
Yeah, okay. I believe
Influential conservatives could have gone hard into pro-mask when criticizing Fauci. And by the way, they also, I would add, could have said it's the Trump vaccine. You should go for it. But they didn't. Their priorities were supporting Trump's COVID lies and, as always, owning the libs. So similar point on vaccines. Could have gone all in on Trump deserves credit. Yeah, he said it too.
Yeah.
These are choices.
Yeah. He tried it. It just, I don't know why it didn't catch on. He abandoned it too quickly.
Well, he didn't do it live.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That could be it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He certainly could.
I mean, sometimes you just have to say, F it, we'll do it live.
Right. I don't know. He
Like
was all in
Bill
on a
O'Reilly
number of
did.
things. I mean, he certainly promoted plenty of other things that didn't work to cure or prevent.
That's because he's a marketing genius.
Yes, right.
So, no, vaccine hesitancy isn't all Republicans' fault. Many Democrats and non-voters are among the unvaxxed. And yes, some criticisms of public messaging land. But the subset refusing for political and culture war reasons, conservative politicians and media did that. And they're still making it worse.
Yes. And they don't admit it, and you can lay the blame with them. And, well, maybe we're started down that path. We got that nice comment about Facebook out of the president the other day. So
Right, which is great about. So we'll have even more detail about the unvaccinated and media responsibility after the break.
Okay, that's a good time for it. I mean, we'll have it already during the break. We're just not going to tell you because what would be the point? You wouldn't hear it. It's not because we don't like you. We'll share it afterwards, and that's when you'll hear it, when the stream returns. Okay, so plenty to look forward to then. You can use the break to look up Olivia Rodrigo if you hadn't done it already. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Might as well start back. I share the rule of thumb with everybody else, too, as we discussed it during the break. If you didn't know who Olivia Rodrigo was, that was actually the hottest thing to do over the last week, is to say that you didn't. And I didn't. But not because I thought it was going to be cool, but because I really didn't. And it's probably true for you, too. But my rule of thumb is if they are about 20 years old and you have no idea who they are, it's a good bet that they are on the Disney Channel somewhere, or were at some point, and that's why you don't know them. And it turns out to be true. Holds true for Olivia Rodrigo. I mean, I don't know what she's up to now exactly. She may still have a show, but they're a real factory over there. The Disney Channel pulls people out of, obscurity, gives them a show for a little while, then they become pop stars, and that's the point at which you realize you don't know them. But if you have young kids, they might be able to tell you who they are, but probably only by their character name. But anyway, holds true for her, too. Congratulations to Disney.
Another rule of thumb is the older I get, the better my kids are at explaining things to me.
Yes, right. And buy Disney stock, I guess, that also means? Probably.
I don't know.
That's my advice to you for the day.
So I'm going to read another thread here, which I think is very good and very informative.
Yes.
from someone named Renee DeResta, who works at Stanford as an observer of political discourse and media. And she says the last 48 hours on here have been all about the vaccine discourse, capital letters. Is Facebook killing people? Is the government passing the buck? Who can even tell what is misinformation and who watches the Watchmen anyway? Oh. I've spent about 7 years watching the anti-vax movement evolve online and have thoughts.
Okay.
And actually, it's those thoughts I'm going to share.
Oh,
First, evolve online is exactly what they did. The vaccines cause autism theory is misinformation. Research has reinforced that time and time again for years, and it's harmful. And once the Andrew Wakefield paper was retracted, since Andrew Wakefield started all that nonsense, the media over time began to stop covering it. And that's because it was harmful to amplify a fake debate. There weren't two sides. An anti-vax mom opinion was not a valid counterpoint to the overwhelming body of research. This was not censorship. This was media deciding what not to amplify to avoid misleading audiences. And that's an important point, I would point out, because they don't do it enough.
Well, yes.
And the worst of the Sunday shows with Chuck Todd, but, you know.
Yeah. Although, just making a point here for later discussion, probably with myself, the content monster. I won't let you get a word in edgeways. Yeah, please. The content monster created that. 18 24-hour news channels on my cable system have to be filled, and maybe there aren't enough experts, or experts don't care enough to do 25 shows that people have never heard of, and so eventually you'll get down to a show that will fill time with reading a report from an expert, and then Concerned Mom panel comes next, and I guess that has something to do with it. And if it's not on TV, it'll be done online.
So the Vaccine Autism True Believers realized in 2009 that they could grow the movement on social media. Facebook offered the opportunity to create pages, to go directly to increasingly large audiences, to target new parents with ads suggesting they follow anti-vax pages and join groups.
Sure.
And this dynamic increased significantly in 2015 when California introduced a bill to ban personal belief exemption for school shots. The anti-vax movement was furious. They grew on Twitter, YouTube, all over social media, networking with the Tea Party, Nation of Islam, whoever, to expand their base.
All right.
Right? This is when the rhetoric of medical freedom and health choice kicked into high gear. It was deliberate rhetoric shift from the same exact people who'd been tweeting for years about mercury toxisms, autism, and every health conspiracy theory under the sun. Media wouldn't cover them, but social media would. And then once the health choice rhetoric that opened the door to new adherents were established, that goes hand in hand with blatant misinformation. So once you hook the health choice people, then you can start talking about everything else. Or as she puts it, come for the freedom, get indoctrinated about the toxins and microchips.
Sure. Or Q, if that's what interests you later.
Exactly. And pedophiles and pizza. Babies of parents in the anti-vax groups died on several occasions after parents took bad advice, so there are real consequences here. And, of course, that's why we read from the I'm sorry I didn't get the vax, subgenre thread.
Yeah.
So the movement leaders include a large number of grifters. The disinformation dozen isn't new. It's a business. They sell books, webinars, supplements, detoxes. Social media offered an incredible opportunity to monetize for charismatic movement leaders, and the groups grew.
Jade eggs.
Yeah. Facebook eventually decided it was time to crack down in 2019, a year of two major measles outbreaks, one of which in which 87 kids died. And to their credit, they removed the groups from the recommendation engine, made the pages harder to find, and stopped accepting money for ads. Okay. In other words, they can do this.
Yes. It's been done.
It's been done by them. These were important and critical policy interventions, and they did address some of what Surgeon General Vivek Murthy and President Biden are saying. People are getting bad information on social platforms, and for many, many years, social media recommended people into the groups, amplifying the wild claims. And the dynamics were highly similar, just as you pointed out, David, to how QAnon grew. And in fact, there was significant overlap between anti-vax groups and Q groups. I could do a 100-plus tweet thread on the mess at some point with the relationship. And when it comes to how information moves across communities on social, QAnon served as a kind of conduit between the anti-vax echo chamber and mainstream MAGA. Anti-vax propaganda started breaking out of the anti-vax echo chamber more frequently. So just to be clear, social media had major impact here in a foundational sense. And as COVID took off, the anti-vax apparatus and its affinity circles pivoted to denigrating COVID vaccine. And that can be documented. But Facebook did improve. And now, despite the focus of the disinformation dozen, perhaps the largest amplifier of COVID has been figures like MT Green and Tucker Carlson. Media, politicians, huge platforms, and that has to be emphasized. So the political angle health choice really appeals to populists. It's a winning rhetorical strategy. And now we're in the morass of, okay, but now what? Here's where we need nuance. Government has not done the best job communicating with the public on health issues for years.
They should.
The CDC, right? CDC, WHO lost significant public trust during COVID. They're used to the old model. Experts in a room explain something, but that model doesn't work anymore. Top-down control of information is bad, particularly when things that are still hypothetical are presented as concrete consensus. This is so depressing to read because this is where I was 15 years ago when I was trying to tell them that. The other thing we have at the moment, though, them being CDC and HHS and them being like they didn't want to listen because their response was, it's just a few loud voices. We don't have to pay attention to this. We'll let you know what's correct. That doesn't
Sounds
work.
familiar.
The other thing we have at the moment, though, politicized influencers and grifters giving people different inaccurate information. That's just as bad.
Yeah.
Flagging harmful content for review isn't censorship. There are arguments to be made about who should be doing the flagging, what moderation approach the platform should use, remove or reduce or inform, flag, whatever.
Yeah.
But harm isn't limited to immediate incitement to violence. There are many questions, like what responsibility do influencers have in exchange for the popularity they enjoy? Okay.
All right.
You have more followers than I do, but I have 25,000 followers or so on Twitter, and I feel responsible for trying to get whatever I'm saying correctly. So if I get something wrong, I try to correct it. And I always try to give links because I'm a blogger.
Yes.
Right? So you do have some responsibility. They now have more reach than most experts, and if they use that influence to enrich themselves at the expense of their audience, what's our recourse? There's also the who decides what's misinformation question. I have a longer article about that coming out in the next couple of days, but for now, one of the challenges we're facing is that even in areas in which there are usually right answers, not political opinions, but scientific facts, the degree of uncertainty in a consensus is not being well communicated, and moderation has been too heavy-handed. What I liked about the Surgeon General's advisory is that it recognizes that in today's democratized information environment in which we all spread information, we all have a role to play. People being actively misled about vaccines is having consequences, but more broadly, there's going to be other possibly worse pandemics. And there's other major issues on which misinformation will negatively impact collective social decisions, like HPV vaccine and trying to stamp out cancer.
Yeah.
Right? The Rick Perry debacle in Texas a decade ago. So the status quo is not working. We need government, media, social media companies, and the public, including citizen journalists and influencers, to all be working together to create an environment in which people are able to make decisions with the most accurate information possible. That's the end. I think it's a great set of points there. And that's why I think we strive to give you the best possible information. And note that there is consensus about stuff. That doesn't necessarily make it right. We're not always right. The experts aren't always right. And we don't always interpret the experts correctly. But we give you the best information possible and correct it when we're wrong. And, you know, you can't just rely on Tony Fauci for everything. He's going to get a lot of stuff wrong. And a lot of the stuff he's going to get wrong is working on a model that was wrong 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and still thinking that's the best way to, you know, convey information. Remember, he's an immunologist. He's an infectious disease guy, right? Yeah. He's a scientist. He's a researcher. He's not appointed to be the public health spokesman. Yeah. He just happens to have a great accent because he's from New York, and yeah, exactly right. You know, and you know, he's very good at saying, yeah, I don't do that, but here's what I do. And you know, that doesn't make sense, but this does. And that was at a time that nobody else had the stature in the Trump administration to say those things, because there may have been better communicators like at CDC, but Trump wouldn't allow them to speak.
True, right? Why would
right? We know that because when they did start to speak, they were censored. They were silenced.
Yes.
And they quit, then they left.
Right. There was that one doctor right away, came right out of the box and was immediately sidelined.
Immediately
I can't
shut down.
remember who that was.
Exactly. And so,
Because they were
the
silenced.
perniciousness of what Trump did is a big deal. But that's part of the reason how Tony Fauci and why Tony Fauci wound up being so prominent.
Yes, and having a distinctive voice the way he does made it obvious when he had been silenced, too. What happened to that doctor that sounded like he was from Brooklyn? I don't know. Yeah, so memorable enough. All right, well, we'll see what she's got more to come, and apparently she's got a job observing things, which is a great gig, so we should check in every once in a while. And look at that. You can save the thread. This thread may be removed at any time, but you can save it as a PDF. Is that a new feature of Thread Reader app, or has it
Yeah,
always
I think
been
so.
there? Okay.
Because they're always worried that Twitter's going to shut them down.
Yeah.
And what you just saved, all of a sudden, the author decided to get rid of it, so now you can't read it
always
anymore.
That. Right. I've deleted my timeline. I'm starting over again. You get one of those types. Okay. Well done. Cool there. I think good insight.
Yeah, so I think that helps to put in perspective what's going on here. One last piece on this topic, since we're on it, and that is by Peter Hotez in Daily Beast. Biden battles a triple-headed monster on vaccines. Ghidorah, beating back anti-vaccine disinformation, will require a far more ambitious counteroffensive. And he talks about the anti-vax complex and how it's a business, and how he's been battling it for a long, long time.
Yes.
The first head is the anti-science disinformation campaign from conservative news outlets like Fox News.
Okay.
The second head is the one that provides the misinformation the far right and others use to weaponize health communication, non-governmental anti-science organizations that monetize the internet through advertising or selling products. And finally, the state actors. U.S. and British intelligence have called out the Russian government for its efforts in the U.S. They often operate through Russia Today and Sputnik News to create wage issues. And the bottom line, the monster is much bigger and formidable than just Facebook or social media, which we were just talking about. So if the Biden administration is serious about countering anti-vaccine disinformation, it must be willing to take on the empire and launch a counteroffensive. Evil empire will not stop at COVID vaccines and prevention. It's just the beginning. The bad guys know we are a nation built on science and technology. The question is, are we willing to fight to protect American science from the three-headed monster?
That's, no. I don't know. Probably not. But what we really should be doing then, and I guess...
Where are Godzilla and Rodan when you need them?
That's true. I mean, we should be outsourcing this fight, shouldn't we? What we need is giant radioactive monsters. How can we get...
Well, we have these pigs running around. Maybe, we could use some homegrown stuff.
30 to 50 irradiated monster hogs.
Hogs, exactly.
Right? Okay, well, that's a big thing in Arkansas. And maybe
but let's talk about
COVID.
not just the depressing stuff and the disadvantages of where we're at. Let's talk about some of the advantages that Biden does have. For example, CBS News poll last night, 58% of Americans approve of President Biden's job in office.
All right.
Hey, folks, the guy is still popular, even with Delta rising, even with inflation concerns, even with not having passed anything in regard to Infrastructure Week. And it's Infrastructure Week again this week, by the way.
Oh, yes,
he's still popular, and he still has a voice, and people still listen to him, and he could still get stuff done.
Even without Chinese ballots with bamboo fibers.
Or bamboo fibers, right? AP did a review of what they know so far, and of course the Cyber Ninja fraud appears to be incredibly disappointing.
Yes, and over, but they won't admit it.
Yeah, well, because it's incredibly disappointing, so they have nothing to say at the moment. And again, I think what we learned about all of this is you can't trust Arizona Republicans.
Well, that's true. And since...
But, it isn't just the Republican Party. It clearly highlights for anybody to see that the Michigan elected officials and Arkansas elected officials and Ohio elected officials and Arizona elected officials on the Republican side, not the careerists who stood firm and said, no, we're doing this professionally. But the people in the Senate and the House in those states are nuts and completely bought into Republican, disinformation and the insurrection. So, it's just open and clear now. So at least you know what sides everybody's on.
I guess that's true. It is metastasizing in different ways. It's not just Republicans, and it's not just Arizona ones. Pennsylvania Republicans determined to bypass their Democratic governor and have their own forensic audit, just like Arizona, which just spent, how long did they spend? 3 months?
3 months. Jamel Boyd, pointed out very,
are.
very clearly in an op-ed in the New York Times a couple of days ago that there's two issues here, and one is voter suppression in terms of who gets to vote, and the other is voter suppression in terms of who gets to count the vote.
Yeah.
And it's who gets to count the vote that's really, the issue for most of us. We said that from the very beginning. Don't worry about whether or not you can get water online. That's small potatoes. The big potatoes is, and if we don't like the job you did, we can throw you out and appoint somebody else.
Yes, not good.
That was in Georgia, and that's true everywhere. So It doesn't necessarily mean it's working, by the way. All of this attention, is one of the reasons why Texas still doesn't have the draconian law that they wanted to pass, and some of it's been modified.
Yeah, that's true. Right, and although the failure of the fraud, it hasn't quite finished things off in Arizona either. I mean, they're very powerfully crazy. But we discussed this, at least in passing last week, that now the Arizona State Senate, which ordered the fraud and isn't getting the results it wants, is basically calling for a do-over. They
want to fraud
something went wrong, right? And we didn't get all the information we were supposed to get. Like, we asked the Democrats to confess, and they didn't, so they're withholding evidence.
Yeah, not only that, we pointed out 3 things that made this whole thing suspect so that we couldn't really get the conclusion we wanted. And the AP reviewed it and said, well, this isn't true, this isn't true, this isn't true, this is completely false, this is you not understanding what goes on. This is what happens when somebody who doesn't do this for a living tries to count votes. Look, according to these files, the files stopped 10 days prior to the election. Well, it's supposed to stop 10 days prior to the election because those files are used by the political parties to figure out who to contact for early voting encouragement. And you don't need them 2 days before the election. They're useless. You're not going to pay for that. Right. Yeah, well, the fact that they stopped and they don't exist means something must have happened because the final vote didn't match the vote 10 days prior to. Well, people can decide to vote in the last 10 days. This is a point you're trying to make? Well, look, numbers don't match. Therefore, Trump's still president. Well, okay. No.
Yeah, they're very literally doing this and insisting that they can. So now this is the fraud. It was already like the 5th look at these votes. Now, of course, all the votes and the ballots have been spoiled by being mishandled.
And the machines.
They want to have a 6th one, and they want to spend money on machines to count things again, which is amazing.
But don't worry, it'll be paid for privately.
Yeah, right, by the South Dakota National Guard.
Exactly. Same source.
Terrific. All right. Well, arrest these people. But
pretty much.
Can't because they're legislators.
So, again, the polls suggest that this just isn't really having the resonance they want. New CBS News poll, 6 months into the Biden administration, Americans are less apprehensive about the year as they were at the start of it. 52% feel hopeful. They think the battle against the pandemic is going somewhat well, tempered now by concern about the Delta variant. In January, 35% thought it was going well. Now 64% do, just to give you an idea.
Well, we were in bad shape in January.
Right. Now, this isn't to guide how you deal with the pandemic. This is just to give you an idea of, how all the frauded stuff is resonating with the American people or not.
Yes, all right.
Okay. And again, these are issue polls. We know we have problems with presidential polling. In fact, there's some big reports about that out today. 2020 presidential polls suffered worst performances in decades, report says. Basically, if you read the AAPOR task force, they say we're not exactly sure why, but basically we count Democrats correctly and we always undercount Republicans. Yeah. And there's no obvious solution to this, and there's something we still have to work on, so we'll try different things, but there's no one quick fix like adding accounting for education that'll fix everything. Oh. And I read that as, the pollsters say they pretty much are okay with Democrats, but they don't know what to do with Republicans any more than we do.
All right.
Because it's not that Republicans lie. It's that there's just so much distrust among Republicans that they just don't do anything and won't cooperate with anybody.
No.
And this is not news if you try to work with them.
Yeah, right.
We were just going over.
I mean, I guess the only solution is to say, I don't know, add 3 points to the Republican on this thing. But
Pretty
who knows
much.
how many points it's going to be, right? And you add the wrong number, you get killed.
Right. So as Natalie Jackson, who does PPRI polling, says, looking to 2024, there'll still be plenty of presidential horse race polls in 2024. And before that, in contests happening in 21, like Virginia, which we'll get to, or California. 2022, 2023. The demand for polls in the early 2021 Georgia Senate runoffs illustrated polls are still a desirable part of campaign coverage. Polls are also still the best way to know what the mass public thinks. But when 2024 rolls around, it looks like pollsters will not be able to say we fixed this or we're the gold standard. Just don't approach it that way.
Okay.
California recall against Newsom is even more ridiculous than our candid camera farces, writes Peter Funt, son of Alan Funt, who originally started Candid Camera.
I was going to say.
The most energized voters are those who want to oust the governor. That's why Newsom is raising as much money as he can. And he gives some examples. He says, I've done 2 separate Candid Camera experiments. This is for his website. I'm not sure he still has a show.
He just won't stop.
But it was interesting.
Yeah.
This is regarding recall elections, and though I consider both funny, neither matches the absurdity being generated by California. Near Columbia University in New York a few years ago, I dispatched my son Danny, so there's a 3rd generation of Candid Camera, with recall petitions listing several city officials. That's the main thing I learned from the article, by the way. 3 generations of Candid Camera. When I was like 10 or 11 years old, I was on Candid Camera.
Were you?
Yeah, they came to my movie theater. And Alan Funt was sitting as the ticket taker. After you bought your ticket, you went to the ticket taker, gave him the ticket, and then you went in.
Yeah.
And it was Alan Funt.
Yeah.
And he said, so we have a new policy today. You can pay whatever you want to. You just have to tell us why. And I was there with a friend. We were cutting school and going to a movie. And so it was pretty cool. It was just us.
Okay.
And I said, it's probably worth about $1. And my friend said, this movie sucks. I'm not paying a thing. And his segment got on.
Well, see, he knew early how to get.
So I know Alan Funt.
How to get the cameras. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, 3rd generation doing it. And near Columbia University, I dispatched my son Danny with recall petitions listing several city officials, but all the names are fictitious. We made them up. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but Candid Camera started in the late 40s, so it gives you an idea how old I am.
Yeah.
I recall any politician said one man as he eagerly signed, I hate them all.
Grr. All right.
Okay. So if you want an idea of, well, how did Trump get votes? Well, because he's not a politician.
Right.
Good enough for me. I hate them all. Another passerby was a law professor who explained that he taught students never to sign anything unless they were en pleine connaissance de cause, in full knowledge of the matter. However, he told my son, I'm going to assume your heart's on the right side, and he signed too.
Okay. But he spoke French. Sure.
So, it gives you an idea of what people think. You can do all the polling you want, but you're going to have people like this.
Yeah, well.
And the 3rd example he gives, which is very funny.
Yeah.
On one occasion, I sent my daughter Stephanie and her friend Rebecca, who were students. Hello, fellow
more
kids.
More funts? Okay. It's a fount of funts.
To gather signatures for a fake recall concocted by Candid Camera of their high school teachers.
Can you do
that? Standing near their high school in California. They petitioned to remove the principal and other staff, including a math teacher. She gives too much homework, they said. The tests are way too hard.
Sure.
And none of the students bought it.
Oh. Too smart.
And Peter Funt writes, I laughed that day, but I wish the folks in our sequence would grow up. Not the kids. They were great. I mean, the adults who for no good reason were only too happy and foolish enough to sign. And that's why we get recalls in California.
That is interesting. I wonder, though, would the kids have done it if it was a change.org petition? They would suddenly believe that was possible.
I don't know. You never know.
They don't trust paper. That's what it is.
Right. And so we'll conclude, because the show's just about over.
Right.
The American
As far as you're
Principles
concerned.
Project, writes Jacob Rubishkin, a conservative dark money group who gives, sort of semi-push polling stuff, polled the Virginia governor race the other day. The top line was McAuliffe 46 and Youngkin 41. Then they ran a battery of anti-McAuliffe messaging on critical race theory, school choice, transgender athletes, etc., and got the Macker 46, Youngkin 43.
Okay.
So it didn't really make a difference.
Well, that's
Keep that in mind, caravans and, Governor Ed Gillespie.
Yeah, right, true. So if you're worried about critical race, transgender caravans, don't worry too much. All right, well, that's good news. It's good that it didn't move the needle much. It didn't change any, and it was targeted at McAuliffe and didn't change his number at all. I guess it's sort of kind of bumped up, maybe just noise level bumped up.
Yeah, but remember, the Democratic polling is correct. The Republican polling, you add 3.
Well, they did add 3 there. 2.
Yeah, they added 2.
Yeah.
So,
hidden one, it's
46,
still out there.
43, 46, 44, and then there'll be the late deciders. So it's a race. You can't tell who's going to win from the polling. But the idea that, all you have to do is mention crime and CRT and this and that and everything else and the Republicans win, which is the way the media is built, not necessarily so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have Governor Gillespie.
That's true. You always go back to that one.
Well, they were so convinced. We were told he's going to win. He's got the momentum. He's talking about issues people care about, fellow kids.
Kitchen table. You're right. Good meme usage there. Well done. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you, Greg. That's much appreciated. Plus a reference to a popular meme at the end.
Plus, I got you through the first hour.
Yeah, that's true. All the way through. And yes, housekeeping that I'll discuss with people on the other side of the break. We won't have an opportunity to talk again until Thursday on this week.
Thursday will come soon enough.
Yes, my fault, not yours, but I'll explain later. It's a good explanation, and that's all I have to say about it now because I'm out of time. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. We'll see you then. Okay. Now I have to explain to everybody. But...
Yeah, now you do. Now you're committed.
Yes, but just so we didn't do the all right, see you Wednesday. Oh, gosh, yes, right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I forgot to tell him.
Right. I remembered that last night. So, you know when I should say something just so we don't do that. Even though we've done it 100 times and nothing has ever happened to us. Right. So, okay.
I'll see you.
Good. Thank you. Talk to you again soon. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I didn't take any notes during the first half of the program. There was about 6 things I wanted to get back to, and I don't know what any of them are. One of them is sort of floating around. I just lost it. There it goes. I could feel memories now just fading and then poof, disappearing. All right. Well, one thing I did remember, because it was only 1 minute, I had to remember it. The housekeeping bit was, yes, Wednesday. Not going to be able to do a new show on Wednesday. Sorry. Again, it feels like this is happening a lot during July, and it is. And it'll happen even more during August because it's the summer and things distract me, and it's sort of like a natural thing. People take time off in the summer. I know we've been doing it haphazardly here. The good reason I have for Wednesday, I knew this was coming, and the plan was to do a show and then afterwards go do this thing. But I don't think anybody can deny me on this one. I mean, you could try, but it doesn't matter. I could just unplug the show. But the point is, my father-in-law's 90th birthday on Wednesday. And, everybody knows what I do in the mornings, and it was okay. I had it all planned to do the show and then hustle out the door very quickly, which is difficult to do and rough on getting all my links together to get to Scott, etc., but manageable. And I even will do some of it in the car on the way down to visit. But anyway, here's the real inside scoop on all this is we can't wait until 11 to leave anymore because, like I said, reminder, 90th birthday, right? What are we going to do for the 90th birthday? One of the things we want to do for the 90th birthday is make sure that we pick up the chicken, the fried chicken from the Good Fried Chicken place that's nearby where they live. And it's a really, really good fried chicken place. And this is one of the few opportunities to go and get that fried chicken because fried chicken is not great for you in the first place. All the more so, I guess, if you're 90. But for a 90th birthday, you got to have the chicken, right? You can't deny them the chicken. Well, as it turns out, the pandemic has affected things at this chicken place. And a couple of times that we visited, once we were finally able to, like the first time we were able to go because everybody had been vaccinated, we got this chicken. And they had a takeout policy, which has now changed. So we'll shorten the story a little bit and say the Good Chicken place won't give us the chicken to go unless we pick it up before the lunchtime rush, which means getting to their place and then, down in the Charlottesville area in time to be able to pick up the chicken before the lunchtime rush, which means getting it, I think their deadline is you got to pick it up by 11:45. You can't make it to Charlottesville from here in 45 minutes. Can't be done, no matter how fast I drive. And so that's the bottom line. The show is off on Wednesday because I got to get to the Good Chicken place before 11:45, and the only way to do that is to forego the show. And if I don't, then he doesn't get his chicken for his 90th birthday. And that's not a thing that's sustainable in this day and age, right? Or in this house. We're in his house, for that matter. So you get the idea. It's a pretty good excuse, I think. We'll be back on Thursday. We can tell you all about how it went. Was the chicken good? Was it how does it rate versus other days? All the important news. So we'll catch up on those things. That also reminds me, I do have another housekeeping item because it's housekeeping. This gives me an opportunity to shift to this new sponsor, not corporate sponsor of the show, but we do, of course, individuals, the donors, new donor to the show via Patreon, Jonathan Vankin. Thank you very much for joining the ranks of those supporting the show. We appreciate it, and it means we don't have to do weird vaccine or QAnon-related grifting from anybody. We just say, this is the nonsense we do, and if you want to donate towards our doing it, that's fine. And for the most part, we do a pretty good job giving relatively accurate information. So thanks for joining in, Jonathan, and the rest of you obviously encouraged to do so too. One of these days, maybe in preparation for these many days off coming up at the beginning of August, I can start thinking I'm going to think about how we're going to handle that. Oh, that reminds me, another thing, another suggestion that's been made on that front. And maybe we'll solicit opinion about this one because as others are listening to me drive myself crazy about how to handle a 2-week absence in the beginning of August, there was this very sensible suggestion made that, what a lot of normal people do in their lives is they take a vacation and then they don't work during that vacation. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of what I'm doing when I'm put on the reruns. And then they said, well, that's work to put on the reruns too. And quite honestly, I don't, this one person said, I don't listen generally to the reruns. I've heard them. Now, some people will also say, I like to hear the reruns, and I like to hear particularly ones from either before I began listening or from way, way long time ago. I did listen, but it's interesting to hear it again with the benefit of hindsight, I guess. Now we see it this way. Things look a little different. It's interesting to hear what we thought at the time, or what was wrong, or what was right. But anyway, he suggested maybe not everybody really cares all that much. Or maybe they say, you know what, you should just take a vacation and don't worry about putting on reruns. And I think that comes from early days in the show when we were first starting out. And I thought, getting used to listening to a podcast every day is a habit that you got to get people to form, and then they don't want to miss anything. And if you take breaks too often, too early in the show, especially if you take a 2-week break, people could forget, I did 2 weeks without that podcast. I don't need to go back. And I don't know. I guess we're past that point now. So anyway, it was an interesting thought, and maybe I'd solicit opinion from people who would miss what. But I've also got some other ideas about how we can handle the absence, and I'll confer with Justice on those things. Anyway, the amount of time I spent on that is meant to reflect on how much I appreciate Jonathan Venkin joining us as a sponsor. And it's really true. So there you go. Additional appreciation. You gave me other things to think about. And that's part of the thing, too. Like, why is it difficult to decide to take a vacation? Everybody takes vacations. Why won't you just do it? And part of the answer is Jonathan Venkin and all the rest of you who I say, they gave me money, like actual money that they could have been spending on things that they want or need, or I don't know, another podcast for all I know. But they gave it to this one. And shouldn't I do something? And I mean, I don't know. It's funny because then I don't. What is this? Chopped liver? I get up every day and do the show. What can you do? You never feel like you're giving enough. If you are a conscientious person and care about, putting together a quality product. Not that there's been evidence that I care about that in all these years, but I don't know. I just, this is a self-esteem issue more than anything else. You're all doing fine. I'm not. And I need to work that out. So I'll need more donations, I guess, for therapy, which is very expensive, even though this is supposed to be my substitute for it. All right, moving on to actual subjects that are still out there for discussion. What was it I mentioned? Yes, right. There was something that came up earlier when we were talking about the National Guard, and that wasn't it wasn't directly on point, National Guard, but it reminded me somehow of something that developed last. Yes, right. Using the National Guard to hunt down the Texas Democrats who have been absenting themselves from the state so that they could prevent the Texas legislature from holding votes during their special session, although it could have happened during a regular session, on their restrictive voting legislation. They were denying a quorum, at least in the Texas Senate, although I understood that there were Texas House members had left town as well, and I'm not sure what their rules are. I'm always used to hearing about it in the context of the Senate rather than their House, but maybe they can do the same thing. But a development on that front. Oh, and by the way, thank you. Comment from the mighty OCD. This, too, is a good suggestion. Others about the 2-week break. Turn it all over to Armando for 2 weeks. I have thought about that, and people have asked about, what about guest hosts for this whole thing? It's doable. Well, I mean, in theory. I don't know whether anybody, much less Armando, would say, sure, 2 weeks solid. I'll just absolutely, I can do it. I can spare myself from work, or even if I'm not working, I could stand to do it for 2 weeks. But yeah, there's the logistics of the thing. Like, I could imagine working it out with Justice. Justice would be fine, I think, basically saying, I don't care where the feed comes from. I'll just plug a different feed in from my remote location. That doesn't make any difference. But in order to provide that feed, I think, here's the thing. Not only would I be asking guest hosts to do this thing, and I think it's the difference between my program and a professional program on a real radio station, et cetera, with lots of money behind it, as you could say, well, in return for your guest hosting, you will be paid for your work. So here we don't have that option. Although, whatever, I could dig deep and give them some money, right? Why not? Just not take it. Those 2 weeks whatever it is that I get out of all of the donations, I could figure out some sort of per diem and just give it to somebody else. But here's the other thing. There's a number of software packages and hardware that's necessary in order to get this stream rolling, and it's not cheap. And so I would either have to, I guess I would buy that software for a guest host, or make them buy it, or I'll buy it and pay them, or I don't know, whatever the arrangement would have to be. But it actually is kind of a pain in the butt, and then configuring it and learning to use the software. It's one thing to call me on Skype and just get on the air. It's another to engineer starting the show each day. And it's doable, and it's teachable, and it's not really out of the question. It's just I would feel a lot better asking people to do that if we were able to give them money to do it. And that we really, not yet, can't do. But I guess if I had started earlier on it, I could have made it happen. But you know how that story goes. Anyway, so yes, I was going to tell you about something that occurred to us when we were thinking about the Texas Democrats leaving the state. Yesterday afternoon, I saw people discussing it. I missed it. I don't know when it happened, but it probably sounds like a Sunday thing. Lindsey Graham got himself on television. That's not unusual at all, especially on a Sunday. And the exchange he had with, this is one of the Fox people. This is Maria Bartiromo, I think. Do I have the name right? I don't think I could recognize her, but I think I saw people talking about it and saying, boy, she's a dope. And so I'm taking their word for it, that it's not another Fox dope that they've misidentified. But Aaron Rupar, who captures all of these things and passes them around for everybody for Vox.com. Now, did he move? Did he used to be, was he Media Matters guy and moved, or was he always Vox? Can't keep track of it, and you can't look at the history of somebody's Twitter profile. So, okay, anyway, Aaron captured this exchange between Lindsey Graham and Maria Bartiromo, I think, and it's a really interesting exchange, and maybe I'll throw it into the queue here so that we can share it. I don't know. I can't decide whether it deserves this much time, but anyway, he has an exchange with her in which he very clearly is interested in bashing the Texas Democrats. That's a very popular thing that I guess some of the pollsters have told the Republicans that works really well as messaging, and say, these Democrats, they won't even do their job, why they should be arrested, or they should not get paid for the days that they're out of the state because they won't do their job and they won't face up to reality. And Democrats are rallying on the other side, and it goes back and forth a little bit. There are Republicans who say no one should ever be allowed to do this, and then Democrats say, in the state of Oregon, the Republicans did that, and they skipped town, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of back and forth. Anyway, Lindsey says, well, we have Infrastructure Week, Part 89, coming up here soon, and one part of that includes this reconciliation bill, and they say it's $3.5 trillion, and it's got all this stuff. They're going to try to do immigration reform in it, and that's a big if. That's a big bird rule, probably not going to happen kind of a thing, but they're harping on it anyway. And he's saying, we don't want that to pass. Why? Maybe I should skip town, and I'll take Republicans with me, and we'll all run away from Washington, and then the Democrats here, who are in control of this legislature, the Congress of the United States, won't be able to pass their thing. And, maybe we could do that. Well, Maria Bartiromo was very interested in this. The problem, of course, is that it doesn't work that way in Congress. It works that way in Texas because they have that funky rule. I believe the rule is, and I've never studied it, I just gather this in passing from other people talking about it, but it seems to be the case, given that they keep running away all the time in order to prevent things from happening, that there is a 2/3 attendance requirement to establish a quorum in the Texas state legislature. And I don't know what rules there are for suggesting the absence of a quorum, but that comes into play in how we do things in the Congress in Washington. But there is no such requirement. A simple majority is enough to establish a quorum in the United States Senate. So for Lindsey Graham to say, well, I'll run away and maybe take all the Republicans with me, and we'll prevent reconciliation from being adopted, and maybe everything else from being adopted in the Senate by absenting ourselves, and then you remind everybody, well, it just takes a simple majority to establish a quorum. Then some really, truly genius level beard strokers in the internet said, well, I don't think that Kamala Harris counts when it comes to establishing a quorum, and there are only 50 Democrats, and a majority of the Senate, a majority would require 51 senators to be present. And only then could you establish a majority. And it may even be the case that the vice president, even if she happens to be in the room, doesn't count in establishing a quorum. Although, of course, I mean, on its face, right there, you have an interesting issue, right? If someone were to say, well, I don't agree that this is a quorum, you could submit the question to the Senate, and presumably, because all the Republicans are gone, they would support a ruling from the chair that the vice president does count, even if the precedents said that it didn't count that way. You could change that precedent, and you'd win your vote too, because all the Republicans are gone. But you don't even need to get that far, because there's another problem that I guess most people just don't realize, is that there's no sort of automatic quorum counting going on in the United States Senate. And I don't know whether that's the case in the Texas Senate or not, but it appears to be an issue for them, because absenting the Democrats from town really does block them from consideration of these bills. But in the U.S. Senate, a quorum is presumed at all times, unless someone suggests the absence of a quorum. Now, usually when you're watching on C-SPAN 2, someone is suggesting the absence of a quorum just as a way of getting a quorum call started for time-wasting purposes. Literally, often for time-wasting purposes. They're just waiting for somebody to get to the floor that they need to do something, or someone who has said they have an interest in speaking and they're scheduled to go next and they haven't arrived yet because they're texting with friends, or they're, late picking up from the good chicken place, whatever the issue may be, and you suggest the absence of a quorum, and they just have the clerk call the roll 100 times until the guy gets there. But unless someone suggests the absence of a quorum, in the United States Senate, they assume that a quorum is present, and they don't count of their own volition, and no one would. And if all the Republicans were gone, all of them, literally all of them were gone, and all the Democrats were there, you still only have 50 and you need 51. That's true. But then if all the Republicans are gone and Democrats are all on the same page with this thing, who's going to suggest the absence of a quorum? Nobody. In fact, they'll know very well never to suggest the absence of a quorum. And of course, if somebody does suggest the absence of a quorum accidentally, like out of, old habit, they've finished speaking and the next person isn't there, or the next person is there, but just out of habit, they say, Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum, and they have the clerk start calling the roll. Someone will quickly realize, well, we don't actually have a quorum here. I need to do something. You can jump to your feet and just ask to be recognized and say, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with. And again, if Democrats are all on the same page, then unanimous consent is had, the roll call is dispensed with, and they continue with business. And what business could they continue with at that point? Anything, whether the reconciliation bill or anything else. And if there are no Republicans around to make any objection to this thing because they're all absenting themselves in order to prevent there from being a quorum, then they lose. Not only on reconciliation, but on everything else, right? Bring the big bipartisan package. You can't get the immigration reform into the reconciliation part of the package, put it in the other bill. Of course, Republicans will object to it. If they were there, they'd object to it. But in the meantime, you just say, well, I ask unanimous consent to proceed to the big bipartisan package, the BIF, in bill form. And the BIF, IBF, the Bilateral Infrastructure Framework in bill form, IBF. There, okay, you like that? And if you don't, you get IBS out of it. Anyway, you can bring that up, and you ask unanimous consent to proceed to it. No one objects. You bring it to the floor. You ask for unanimous consent to be considered as passed. No one objects. It's passed. You ask for a vote, whatever, and nobody's there to filibuster it and demand that there be a cloture vote ahead of time. Instead, fine, absent yourself. So basically, this idea that they should absent themselves from Washington, fantastic. Go ahead. You should. Go for it. Not because you're right, but because you're wrong. Go ahead and do it. Anyway, it's a very interesting exchange, as I said, and it's about a minute and a half long. It's also interesting on another level, which is that then prompted people to ask, gosh, does Lindsey Graham really not know the rules? And he does know the rules. And then it got people to speculate on, well, is he just hoping that all the idiots watching the show don't know the rules? That could be it. But, he basically knows that this whole issue of Texas Democrats absenting themselves has angered Republicans. And so they're happy to rally around any mention of it. But what really has happening here is Lindsey Graham knows that that's not the rule, but Maria Bartiromo does not. And he's counting on that. And then when she actually gets interested in it and sort of kind of, she doesn't follow up and ask questions like, will that work? But she says, I forget exactly what she says. She's like, wow, that's a great idea, whatever. But as it becomes obvious that she's impliedly, anyway, asking, will that work? Lindsey Graham shifts his answer to, well, I'm going to stay adjacent to that topic and talk about how fun it would be if it would work. But I never, once it's handed back to me, I never actually claim that would work. And so all of his statements afterwards are about the subject and about how bad it is that Democrats would do this thing and they really shouldn't be able to, and they should be forced to do their job, and I wish we could do the same, but never actually saying that it would work. It's kind of an interesting exchange. And let me roll it a little bit.
If for some reason they pass reconciliation budget resolution to bring that bill to the floor of the United States Senate, the $3.5 trillion bill.
And remember here, he lost track for just a second of what he's talking about. If for some reason they pass budget reconciliation, well, first, of course, they have to pass the budget resolution authorizing the use of the reconciliation process. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about absenting himself from D.C. to prevent them from adopting the budget that would make reconciliation possible. And maybe absenting himself later on from the vote on the reconciliation bill as well. But he realizes right away, okay, well, I've confused the issue, but I sort of clear it up there. That sort of sets the table.
You got to have a quorum to pass a bill in the Senate. I would leave before I'd let that happen. So to my Republican colleagues, we may...
Right there, Bartiromo's eyebrows raised and the eyes bug out. I would leave. She's now intrigued.
Learn something from our Democratic friends in Texas when it comes to avoiding a $3.5 trillion tax and spend package. Leave town.
Wow. So you just see them leave and you're saying, fine, they were effective in not giving the Republicans a quorum. You'll do the same thing on a $3.5 trillion tax and spend.
All right, so there you go. So she's saying, so you'll do the same thing. You saw it be effective in Texas, so now you'll do the same thing. And now you see it registers on Lindsey Graham's face. No, we really won't, but I don't want to lose the momentum here, so...
Hey, Vice President Harris, if you think these people are heroes, well, then I expect you to show up and pat us on the back.
Right, so I'm not going to do it because it won't work. But hey, let me turn this into somehow this is hypocrisy for Democrats. If you think that the Texas Democrats are heroes, then come pat us on the back wherever we might absent ourselves to. Except we won't because that won't work. But since you won't see Harris patting us on the back, I must be right because I dared her to do it, but she won't. Therefore, something.
Hell yeah, I would leave. I will use everything lawfully in my toolbox to prevent rampant inflation. A $3.5 trillion infrastructure package that's got nothing to do with infrastructure, that is a tax and spend dream of the socialist left.
Yeah, the rest of this is yada yada. I hate spending and something, and it's totally going to cause inflation, even though it may not. And probably won't, and there's been no sign of it yet, and a million reasons why this might be wrong, including all of his and all of Republicans' constant predictions of doom from all packages of all sorts ever offered by Democrats, going back to Social Security in 1935. We've been over that ground a number of times. But I thought that was he's good at this. It was a very adept flip. She's basically tosses it back to him by saying, would you really do this? You're really going to be able to prevent this? We no longer have to worry about this thing? because you guys are going to step up as heroes. Well, what I'm saying is if Texas Democrats get hailed as heroes by Vice President Harris, how come she won't hail us as heroes? Well, because one, you're not heroes. Two, you're not going to do this thing that the Texas Democrats did. But yet, Republicans will be running around saying, what a hypocrite Harris is. She didn't praise them for discussing leaving. Well, so what, right? Well, she praised the Texas Democrats for leaving. Why won't she praise Washington Republicans for leaving? Well, they didn't leave. Well, but they were thinking about leaving. Well, you have a basic fundamental problem here. They left. You say they got pats on the back from the vice president. And Lindsey Graham wants to know why he didn't get a pat on the back from the vice president. He didn't leave. Well, but he said he was thinking of it. Really? Is that all it takes? Not only are you going to get a participation trophy, you get a participation trophy now for thinking about participating. I thought you were against this stuff. Anyway, that ate up a whole segment, but no one else will analyze this goddamn thing the way we do. See? We do that much better. Everyone will tell you that he said he was going to leave, but that won't really work. We told you why, but one extra layer of analysis, too. See, that's worth it.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One more segment to get it all in. Are you ready? Let's go. Just go 50 other stories. Lots of things to get to today, including, let's see, first of all anyway. This morning, the first of the felony defendants from the January 6th insurgency, the Capitol riot, whatever you want to call it, except not a hugging and kissing fest, as Trump wants to claim it is. Anyway, first sentencing is happening today. Florida man Paul Hodgkins is in the dock for this. About to be sentenced. Let's see. Josh Gerstein is covering this live. Many reporters covering this thing live. This Gerstein doing so for Politico, saying, interesting. A couple of comments here. Where's is the other one? From Adam Klasfeld, who is covering for Law Crime News, saying the judge is rejecting Hodgkins' request to be designated a minor participant in the offense. I didn't do very much. Shouldn't I be let off the hook? Maybe I should get a misdemeanor, trespassing or something. And the judge saying, no, we have video of you on the floor of the Senate. That I think puts you among the major players in all this. You didn't tell anybody what to do. You didn't have any particular impact, I guess. But if you made it all the way to the Senate floor, you're really asking for it. Let's see. He also notes in this tweet here, Hodgkins agreed to pay $2,000 in restitution, the judge notes. To what end, I don't know. But Josh Gerstein's coverage just saying that, Hodgkins is about to be sentenced for obstructing an official proceeding by going onto the Senate floor with a Trump flag and rifling through senators' desks. So I think rightfully so that he's facing sentencing today. And apparently there's something like, 15, 18 months on the table, which is not enough by any stretch of the imagination. But I guess if all you're getting charged for, I don't know why I guess they want to get convictions. So they're undercharging, I think, in a lot of these things, with things that they, there's very little doubt that they can prove, since there's video evidence of them being there and they're not supposed to be there, and that's trespassing. But yeah, in terms of charging people with insurrection, so far, no, they're just not doing it. Should they be doing it? They should be doing it. Are they doing it? No, they're not. And is that because they're afraid that that's sometimes, that would be more difficult, I guess, to establish. I don't know what the elements are. They could claim they were, they might lose eventually, but they might not lose if they're sitting there saying, well, we had a First Amendment right to assemble, for instance, and petition for redress of grievances. And okay, we went a little far. But, mitigating circumstances, I don't know what they might be, but they could claim it. And all you need is one person on the jury to say, yeah, that's a legitimate grievance, and storming the Capitol, for whatever reason, is within bounds for me, and they don't get the conviction. Although that's all you would need to not get the conviction on the trespassing. They just figure that's more embarrassing for for the juror to do. Anyway, so that's in the news. I just thought I would make some mention of it. I'll make brief mention also, just to keep you up to date on these things. In case you were thinking, sure, my horse deserves his deworming, but I'm worried about COVID, so I'm going to eat his ivermectin tablets instead of him, because that's good news and real advice, and I should try it. The answer is no, it is not. For whatever reason, the nuts were pointing to this for a long time and saying that it would work. And then they got a study of some sort that came out that they said, aha, see, scientific study. Remember, I didn't believe in science or the medical profession, the establishment, the medical establishment before, because they were telling me ivermectin is a medication for horses. Even Dr. Ed said it, you might have remembered on our program. We interviewed the famous horse doctor who also administers to horses as well. And anyway, the medical establishment said no, but I say no to the medical establishment. Then part of the medical establishment, a doctor, published an article, or pre-published an article anyway, in a medical journal, that's medical establishment, saying ivermectin was fine and it worked just great. And then all of a sudden they did believe in the medical establishment, because as medical gimmitarians, they said, this one says what I want, so everybody in your face, go read this study. Well, there was only the one study, which should tip you off. And anyway, guess what? This study, referred to as huge in this article in The Guardian, huge study supporting ivermectin as COVID treatment withdrawn over ethical concerns. The preprint endorsing ivermectin as a coronavirus therapy has been widely cited, but independent researchers find glaring discrepancies in the data. And you might be interested in what those discrepancies are. But before I go on any further with it, I guess it's worth noting that maybe that, I don't know, you might be tempted to gloat, I guess, about the fact that, I don't know, the thing we thought originally about it not being wise to take your horse's medicine really is true. However, we are reminded, and again, here reminded by our pals at Irreverent Duo, and I still have to find out, who's responsible for that Twitter feed so that I can credit things correctly. But I think we got it right. Anyway, but the point being made here, and I'll have to I can grab the tweet later on, but technically this is bad news. It would be nice if ivermectin actually worked. We would feel perhaps silly telling people that they were silly taking the horse medication, but then at least there would be something we could do to treat or prevent COVID. And the sad news is ivermectin is not that thing, so too bad. So I guess we could say we should be willing to be proved wrong on this stuff. But anyway, not in this case. So no dice on that one. Are you interested in finding out what is going on with the data? It's not that long of a piece. Let me just read you the whole thing. I wasn't going to do it, but it's kind of interesting. The efficacy of a drug being promoted by right-wing figures worldwide for treating COVID-19 is in serious doubt after a major study suggesting the treatment is effective against the virus was withdrawn due to ethical concerns. Well, the ethical concerns don't tell us very much, but wait till you hear the details of the ethical concerns. The preprint study, and it's getting to the point where preprints maybe are outliving their usefulness. They were letting a lot of those get through in the interest of maybe possibly finding something very quickly, and didn't want to withhold things from the public if it might help. But there's a lot of preprints getting retracted these days, it seems like. But okay. The preprint study on the efficacy and safety of ivermectin, a drug used against parasites such as worms and head lice. So maybe there are some human uses for it. In treating COVID-19, the safety and efficacy in treating COVID was led by Dr. Ahmed El-Ghazar, or El-Ghazar, I don't know, from Benha University in Egypt. And it was published on the Research Square website in November. It claimed to be a randomized control trial, a type of study crucial in medicine because it is considered to provide the most reliable evidence on the effectiveness of interventions due to the minimal risk of confounding factors influencing the results. El-Ghazar is listed as chief editor of the Benha Medical Journal and is an editorial board member. The study found that patients with COVID-19 treated in hospital, remember this is The Guardian writing, in hospital, right, who received ivermectin early reported substantial recovery. Sounds good, right? And that there was a substantial improvement in reduction in mortality rates in ivermectin-treated groups by 90%. But the drug's promise as a treatment for the virus is in serious doubt after the El-Ghazar study was pulled from the Research Square website on Thursday due to ethical concerns. All right, already. What are they? Research Square did not outline what those concerns were, but we have this. A medical student in London, Jack Lawrence, was among the first to identify serious concerns about the paper, leading to the retraction. He first became aware of the El-Ghazar preprint when it was assigned to him by one of his lecturers for an assignment that formed part of his master's degree. He found the introduction section of the paper appeared to have been almost entirely plagiarized. Uh-oh. Well, that's a big ethical concern. But what about the data itself? There's more on that. It appeared the authors had run entire paragraphs from press releases and websites about ivermectin and COVID through a thesaurus to try to change key words to try to avoid being caught for plagiarism. Humorously, this led them to change the phrase severe acute respiratory syndrome in one case, which is unfortunately the name of the actual virus. SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. That's not something that you mess with. That's got to stay verbatim, right? But because they didn't control for that, at one point they refer to severe acute respiratory syndrome as extreme intense respiratory syndrome, Lawrence said. So that's not good. You're going to get caught that way. The data also looked suspicious to Lawrence, with the raw data apparently contradicting the study protocol on several occasions. That also doesn't look good. The authors claimed to have done the study on only 18 to 80-year-olds, but at least 3 patients in the data set were under 18, Lawrence said. So, I don't know how bad a mistake that is, but, it ain't good. The authors claimed they conducted the study between the 8th of June and the 20th of September 2020. However, most of the patients who died were admitted into hospital and died before the 8th of June, according to the raw data. That also is not good. Most of your studied patients died before the study began. How did you include them in the study at that point? I mean, could it be a typo? I guess, but how many typos should you be allowed before you're saying, I thought you said everybody was over 18? At least these 3 aren't. I don't know how many people were in the study, but if it's a whole lot, then maybe 3 is insignificant. If it's not that many, then maybe 3 is significant. But on the other hand, you're also telling me that some portion of the patients who were involved in the study were actually dead at the time. How many is that? The data, as it turns out, was also terribly formatted and includes one patient who left hospital on the non-existent date of June 31st, 2020. That could be a typo too, but how many typos are you allowed? There were other concerns. In their paper, the authors claim that 4 out of 100 patients, and I don't know if that's the whole universe of it or that was the rate at which it happened, but 4 out of 100 patients died in their standard treatment group for mild and moderate COVID-19, Lawrence said. According to the original data, the number was 0, the same as the ivermectin treatment group. In their ivermectin treatment group for severe COVID-19, the authors claim 2 patients died. But the number in their raw data is 4. So again, when it comes to, is it a typo? Is it not a typo? If your basic information is the number of people who died, I think you have to get that right. And of course, if in your ivermectin treatment group, 4 people die, but you say, well, 2 did. We did 50% better than the data suggests because we like it. We want to be that way. That's not going to fly either. Lawrence and The Guardian sent El-Ghazar a comprehensive list of questions about the data but did not receive a reply. The university's press office also did not respond. Lawrence contacted an Australian chronic disease epidemiologist from the University of Wollongong. That's a real place. I don't know that I've pronounced it correctly, but it's a real place. His name is Gideon Meyerowitz-Katz. Okay, well, whatever. And a data analyst, it doesn't sound Jewish at least, and a data analyst affiliated with Linnaeus University in Sweden, where they're doing great with COVID, who reviews scientific papers for errors. That's his specialty. Let's see. Nick Brown, is that the guy's name? The data analyst? Anyway, they contacted Gideon and Nick here for help analyzing, with an S, the data and study results more thoroughly. Brown created a comprehensive document uncovering numerous data errors, discrepancies, and concerns, which he provided to The Guardian. According to his findings, the authors had clearly repeated data between patients. Now we're getting into some really serious ethical concerns here. The main error is that at least 79 of the patient records are obvious clones of other records, Brown told The Guardian. It's certainly the hardest to explain away as an innocent error, especially since the clones aren't even pure copies. There are signs that they have tried to change 1 or 2 fields to try to make them look more natural. So cover up that didn't work on top of it all. The other studies on ivermectin are still underway. In the UK, the University of Oxford is testing whether giving people with COVID-19 ivermectin prevents them from ending up in hospital. The El-Ghazar study was one of the largest and most promising, showing the drug may help COVID patients, as has often been cited by proponents of the drug as evidence of its effectiveness. This is despite a peer-reviewed paper published in the journal Clinical Infectious Diseases in June, finding ivermectin is, quote, not a viable option to treat COVID-19 patients. Meyerowitz-Katz told The Guardian that this is one of the biggest ivermectin studies out there, and it appeared to him the data was just totally faked. That's, quote, just totally faked. This was concerning because 2 meta-analyses of ivermectin for treating COVID-19 had included the El-Ghazar study in the results. The meta-analysis is a statistical analysis that combines the results of multiple scientific studies to determine what the overall scientific literature has found about a treatment or intervention. Because the El-Ghazar study is so large and so massively positive, showing a 90% reduction in mortality, which was a lie as it turns out, it hugely, or at least according to their own evidence, their own data, it hugely skews the evidence in favor of ivermectin. Meyerowitz-Katz said, if you remove this one study from the scientific literature, suddenly there are very few positive, randomized control trials of ivermectin for COVID-19. Indeed, if you get rid of just this research, most meta-analyses that have found positive results, and net, right, would have their conclusions entirely reversed. Kyle Sheldrick, a Sydney doctor and researcher, also independently raised concerns about the paper. He found numbers the authors provided for several standard deviations, a measure of variation in a group of data points mentioned in tables in the paper, were mathematically impossible given the range of numbers provided in the same table. Sheldrick said that the completeness of data was further evidence suggesting possible fabrication, noting that in real-world conditions, this was almost impossible. He also identified the duplication of patient deaths and data. So two of these researchers came up with evidence that lots of the data had just been cloned. Ivermectin gained momentum throughout Latin America and India, largely based on the evidence from preprint studies. In March, the World Health Organization warned against the use of ivermectin outside well-designed clinical trials. The conservative Australian MP Craig Kelly, who was also promoted the use of the anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine, that's right, to treat COVID-19, despite World Health Organization advice that clinical trials show it doesn't prevent illness or death, has been among those promoting ivermectin. Several Indian media outlets ran stories on Kelly in the past week after he asked Uttar Pradesh to loan the state's chief minister, Adityanath, I guess is the last name of the chief minister, to Australia to release ivermectin. What does this say? Chief minister. I don't know. Or maybe that's, I don't know. There's only one name there. So either the state's chief minister is like Madonna and has only one name, or they meant perhaps the producer of ivermectin. Anyway, after this story was initially published, Kelly contacted The Guardian to say he disagreed that there was no evidence that hydroxychloroquine worked, and he stood by his views. Lawrence said what started out as a simple university assignment had led to a comprehensive investigation into an apparent scientific fraud at a time when there is a whole ivermectin hype dominated by a mix of right-wing figures, anti-vaxxers, and outright conspiracists. Although science trends toward self-correction, something is clearly broken, and a system that can allow a study as full of problems as the El Ghazar paper to run unchallenged for 7 months, he said. Thousands of highly educated scientists, doctors, pharmacists, and at least 4 major medicines regulators missed a fraud so apparent that it might as well have come with a flashing neon sign. That all this happened amid an ongoing global health crisis of epic proportions is all the more terrifying. So there you go. That I thought was pretty interesting and well worth reading all the way through. They're pretty forceful in their condemnation of that paper, and I thought you might want to hear it. All right, other interesting stories happening today. Maybe we'll save for tomorrow and later in the week the other major story that developed over the weekend and into today about the spyware, the Israeli-produced spyware that has turned up on the phones of journalists and activists and foreign government officials and Jamal Khashoggi's wife as well. All of this of significant interest. Of course, this software developed and distributed, sold by this Israeli firm for the purpose of tracking not journalists and activists and Khashoggi, but terrorists. But hey, if it's up to every individual government to determine who terrorists are, well, you know, what can you do? Sometimes that's going to land on journalists that we don't like. And even though we kidnapped and drugged him and then cut him into pieces with a bone saw, the point is, isn't he really the terrorist in this situation? I mean, come on. It can't be me. I'm a crown prince. Crown princes aren't terrorists. By definition, if you're trying to choose between who's the terrorist and it's a close call, if one guy's a crown prince, the other guy's the terrorist. It just can't happen. Can't happen. So that's pretty interesting. We'll dig further into that perhaps in the rest of the week when we can give that some more time. Other quick hits before we exit for the day. COVID arrives in the Olympic Village in Tokyo, where they are inexplicably going forward with the Summer Olympic Games a year late. In about a week, I think, they'll do the opening ceremonies, or maybe that's even happening this Friday, or maybe they've suspended that for COVID, but not the rest of the things. Anyway, at least a couple of athletes in the village have turned up positive, and now word arrives that the first American athlete has tested positive as well. The U.S. Olympic Committee revealing that a member of the U.S. women's gymnastics team has tested positive for COVID-19. Apparently, it is an alternate athlete, an alternate on the, what is it called? Artistic gymnastics. Is that a new thing, or is that the new name for rhythmic gymnastics? I'm not really sure. I don't keep track of those things. So, like, if you were thinking, well, oh my God, is it one of the big names of American gymnastics? I guess not. An alternate for one thing. And in the artistic gymnastics, not the gymnastics. This is gymnastics. And by the way, as ridiculous as it seems, I just imagine that the artistic gymnastics is, I know it's incredibly demanding. Don't think like it's fake because, anybody can do it. No, that's never the case. But it just doesn't get as much attention as regular gymnastics. For whatever reason, I imagine it has its fans, and even among the regular gymnastics crowd, they have an appreciation for it too. Anyway, don't worry about it. It's just a matter of time before somebody else turns up. Apparently, there was no requirement by the U.S. Olympic Committee that our athletes be vaccinated, which maybe wasn't a great approach to things, considering how strict they are being about, for instance, marijuana use, which I think we all are pretty clear on that not being a performance-enhancing drug, but whatever. Let's see. Other items of note on the COVID front, of course, I understand that the UK opens again, like drops all COVID restrictions today, or at least that was the plan. I don't know whether they're going forward because, as it happens, the UK's health minister has now had a positive diagnosis for COVID. And I think this is the second UK health minister to get COVID during the pandemic. I don't know when else you're going to get it, but the second one. And I guess the health minister was, in preparation for this opening or dropping of all the restrictions, must have met with Prime Minister Boris Johnson at some point, who then said, well, to hell with it, I'm not going to isolate because who gives a damn, and something, and I already had COVID anyway, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And maybe he's even gotten vaccinated, but he's now reversed his stance, I guess been forced to, and he will isolate. So the health minister will be sick with COVID and the prime minister in isolation for fear of his second bout of COVID, amidst their saying, don't worry about it, everybody else in Britain, just go for it. And how are they doing? I don't know whether it's Delta variant or any other variant, but the United Kingdom has stood at the top of the lists the past couple of days for the most new cases of COVID reported in each day, outpacing the people who have been at the top of the list for a long time. India, Brazil, of late Indonesia has found itself at the top of the list. The United States has worked its way back into the top 5, top 10, but UK at the top, literally where the largest number of new cases each day of the past 2 days has been, is saying, yep, no restrictions, everybody go to it, and don't mind the fact that our government has all got COVID. So that's where we are. The Olympics begin, and we're doing our thing here, and people still continue to resist vaccine, distancing, staying at home, masking, etc., etc. And what am I going to tell you? We're back in the hunt every day in the top 10 lists. All right. Anything else quick that I can squeeze in? Probably not. We're down to about 30 seconds here before we have the alarm go off and we start waiting for the music. Let's throw this in. We can at least squeeze this in. This one seems like fun. It's from The Hill, and they usually do things quick and dirty. Ex-Trump official, not a very important one, but and I think we've heard his name before, but what a quote. The number one national security threat I've ever seen is the Republican Party. How do you like that? Let's find out what's behind this quote. A former Trump administration official is calling the Republican Party the number one national security threat. I agree. Miles Taylor, you remember this guy? A former Department of Homeland Security official made the comment during a Thursday interview on MSNBC's The Read Out, right? Okay. I've spent my whole career not as a political operative. I've never worked on a campaign in my life other than campaigning against Trump. I'm a national security guy. I've worked in national security, pardon me, against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Russia, Taylor said. Just tried to power through that frog in the throat. It doesn't really work. And the number one national security threat I've ever seen in my life to this country's democracy is the party that I'm in, the Republican Party. It is the number one national security, and he says security twice in this instance, number one national security threat to the United States of America, he said. Taylor further warned that the House would become a haunted house if the GOP regains control over the lower chamber. He added that if Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy became Speaker, and who knows whether he really will since they want to hand it to Trump, it would represent former President Trump's hand on that Speaker's gavel. If Kevin McCarthy continues to pay homage to a twice impeached presidential loser, I think it should give all Americans pause and make them worry about the future of this country and national security, Taylor concluded. We'll drop it at this point and say his point's been made. I agree, and it's about time more of us started thinking of the Republican Party not as the counterpart to the Democratic Party in our two-party system, but as something else, something we've encouraged people to do for quite a while on this show. And something else we've encouraged people to do for quite a while on this show is to stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What a segue. Man, Justice Putnam is up next. Let's see what he's got on tap. Time magazine reporter Charlotte Alter scored a rare on-the-record interview with Tucker Carlson and reveals why he is so appealing to the extreme conservative base. I'd like to know if you would too. Well then, just stay tuned and we'll figure it all out. More after this.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Look at this. Dozens were treated after a chemical leak at an unregulated water park near Houston, thanks Texas. And the Nabisco factory at Fall Lawn, New Jersey has closed after 63 years of production. Long history in New Jersey, Nabisco. Remind me, I'll tell you about it sometime. Stay tuned.